Hi, you're listening to Boggy Talk, Faith Conversations in the Mud, a resource of Church on Bayshore. Boggy Talk is recorded on Boggy Bayou in Niceville, Florida, and is hosted by Justin Wyatt and James Ross, pastors at Church on Bayshore. We typically want every matter of faith and life to have crystal clear answers, but it isn't always that easy. This podcast digs in to help Christians think with a kingdom mentality about topics that sometimes get muddy and bog us down. So let's dive in.
All right. Well, hey, and welcome to Boggy Talk for week 2 of our Pastor Appreciation Month. We are featuring pastors who we appreciate. Last week, you heard Pastor Justin interview Pastor Troy Hamilton from Rocky Bayou Baptist Church. And I guess depending on where you're at theologically, we're getting a little more serious or we're getting more lighter. I don't know. We have a Methodist pastor here with us, Rurel Ausley. So let me first just say, I am so grateful that you took the time to be with us today.
I'm glad to be here. Appreciate it.
So for those that you don't know Rurel, he has been a pastor here in Niceville for how many years?
24.
24 years. And he has been pastoring a long time before
They've
that.
heard everything I have to say.
Well, one thing I have to ask you, and I know you've been asked this a lot before we get started in your background, is Rurel. The name, Rurel.
Where did it come
I
from?
Googled it, so there are other people named Rurel, but...
Yeah, and they spell it all a lot of different ways. I hate to say this, but my middle name is Reuben, and my dad told me that they were 2 Old Testament names. So, you know, Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, which is also known by Reuel,
That's right.
R-E-U-E-L.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking for good country folks, they probably misspelled it. But that was where, I think it's Reuel, and it's interesting to give you a little, the Hebrew thing. El, everybody knows Bethel and El is God. And so Ru, the root there is look. And Ben's a son. Everybody that's Ben is a son. So it's almost like, look, God, look, a son.
Oh, wow.
I don't think my grandparents had any idea. I think they stumbled on that in the dark.
Well, speaking of your grandparents, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, and how you ended up in ministry?
Yeah. Well, grew up in Geneva, Alabama, which is near the southeastern corner. Most people know Dothan. If they don't know Geneva, people around here may know Geneva because it's a little closer. And as a junior high, you know, had a great pastor preaching the gospel and everything. That's when I came to Christ. I had another friend that was a Baptist Christian. I make sure that's together there, because it can be, you can be Methodist, not a Christian too. But he felt called into the ministry. And I said, you know, Teddy, what do you mean by that? And he just kind of shared how he prayed. And so I thought, well, maybe that's what I need to do, you know, because all of us, we grew up knowing God had a plan for our life, and that's what I wanted. That's why I came to Christ. I wanted to do what He wanted me to do, and I wanted to be who He wanted me to be. And so I began praying, and this whole thought about being called into the ministry started coming, and that was not my thought. That was not what I was thinking about, but the more I prayed about it. So finally I just said, well, Lord, I'm not going to go into this without something really clear. I mean, you're just going to have to be clear on this one. So I gave him a little prayer, talk about laying a fleece out. I said, Lord, I'd like to share my testimony with another youth group somewhere. And I'd like for that invitation to come within the week. I figured I had him pretty well hogtied, as we'd say in Alabama, you know, for him to get all of those together, excuse me, was going to be really, really hard. But we were planning a youth revival, and I went over to this girl's house later that week. I'd just gotten a brand new Thompson Chain Reference Bible. I remember it cost $36. And back
That's a lot back then.
1970, that was $1 million Bible. And it's about the only other specialty Bible you can get.
You already said 1970, because I was actually going to make jokes and say, so did we enter World War II after you were called to ministry or before?
Yeah, my dad fought in World War II, so just to get the context there. And so after we planned the revival, I took that Bible and I showed it, and the girl whose house we were at said, Rule, said, she went to another church. It happened to be a Methodist church. She said, our MYF, the Methodist Youth Fellowship. She said, I'm in charge of the program next Sunday. And I was just wondering if you'd come and give your testimony there. And you could have knocked me over with a feather. Nobody there had any idea what had just happened. But deep within my heart, I just said, I've been called to the ministry. But I gave it a good fight for about 6 months. I fought bravely. And finally lost. And so the rest, just began to, I told my pastor, and of course, as small towns do, they put it on the front page of the Geneva Reaper.
Wow. I don't think they do that in the Bay Beacon anymore.
When someone gets called to the ministry, I don't know either. But so I began filling in, and I did in my summers in college. I was back then they'd have these youth pastors for a summer. I don't know if they do that anymore. I don't think they do. But every summer I'd go to new church, and then one summer I did evangelism. I did those youth weeks. One after another all summer long. I did two of those summers and doing that, and then went off to seminary.
And you went to the Methodist Seminary, Asbury, right?
Well, technically, it is not a United Methodist Seminary.
Okay, it's not. I didn't know that.
They are not an official seminary.
Okay. Well,
That's why I went to it.
I could say this. I don't know if you can say this. Every solid Methodist I know just about went to Asbury.
That would be true because it is a Wesleyan theological seminary. It is independent.
Okay.
And most of our denominational seminaries, I would say, are very liberal. So those who want the conservative education, believe in the Bible and all that kind of stuff, do go to Asbury. And it's one of the top 10 largest seminaries, period.
Yeah.
And just on the commercial side of it, they are doing exceptionally well. So are the Southern Baptist couple that I'm aware of are doing exceptionally well in a time when seminary education is just like church attendance and everything else is going down. So God has his hand on a few seminaries, and I would just attribute it to staying faithful to, biblical Christianity and what we've typically known that has been agreed upon through the ages.
So speaking of God's hand, so is that where you met your bride?
I did.
Asbury?
She was in seminary too. She got a master's in arts and religion and basically inductive Bible study because she had been teaching as a missionary down in Costa Rica. Decided she needed more help. Came back. Was planning on going back to be a missionary. But
oh, wow. Okay.
But she did become a missionary in rural Alabama. Most of our churches are small.
So you guys have been married how long now?
Let's see, August the 24th.
Hey, that's my birthday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was 41 years.
Okay. All right. You've been married a little bit longer than I've been alive.
There you go.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's
and you
why
guys,
I'm so much smarter.
Hey,
I've been around, man.
Wiser, that's for sure.
Wiser.
Yeah. Well, how about kids? You guys have a couple kids?
Yes, we have 3 sons.
Okay.
The oldest is a lawyer here in Okaloosa County. The youngest is an engineer at Air Force Research Lab.
Okay.
The middle one's an engineer in Atlanta.
Okay. And I know you have grandkids because I see you post pictures of your grandkids.
Got 5 of them, 4 boys and a girl. And the oldest one is 6.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think most people who are watching or listening know this already, but just in case you don't know, I haven't even mentioned this. Rurel is the pastor that people who've been here a long time call the church up the hill. He's been the pastor there 24 years, and God has really done a lot of incredible things through their ministry. But you said before that you were mostly in small town churches in Alabama. So why don't you tell us kind of what brought you to the big city of Niceville and kind of how God has blessed through the years.
Okay. Well, I'll just have to educate you about United Methodist Church, about what brought me here to Niceville. We have a district superintendent that oversee, but then a bishop that makes final decisions on things. And on the large churches, like the church up the hill would have been when I came, that's a decision that the bishop makes. So they'll call you and tell you we've just appointed you to Niceville.
Okay.
after, I'd been in 18 years, and so I could say at this point, are you asking or telling? And typically on the larger churches, they'd say we're asking.
Okay.
But you'd be an idiot to turn it down, So anyway, but I did. I gathered all my family together and asked their opinion. We had a 5-year-old at that time. He said, well, I'm going wherever Mama goes. So I knew I was going to win the vote. Anyway, so that's how it came. But we were in a church in Clanton, Alabama with about an average attendance of 300. So I go from 300 to 1,000. I go from 2-3 people on staff to boatload of staff. So it was I was really scared, really scared. In fact, I've told all my congregation I went into panic attacks and everything. I'd struggled with depression and discouragement most of my life, but that brought anxiety into it to a new level. So there was a really touch and go 2 or 3 years. And I'll just tell you something about that scripture that says, when we're weak, we're made strong. The church just growing. None of them knew anything that was going on in me personally. I didn't feel comfortable sharing it or anything like that, but the church was just growing. And I knew beyond a shadow of doubt it had zero to do with me. Well, I was laid low.
Yeah. Wow. Well, one of the things I said this about you before we had even met, but that I appreciate is, Crosspoint, and practically speaking, when you think of church success is right up there with just about any church because, you're not as big as a church in Dallas or wherever.
No,
man,
but we're in Niceville.
You could just preach the Bible in Dallas and have 1,000 people, right? So
if you did it proportionately, we'd probably be the largest church in the country.
Right.
Did it proportionally, but that really doesn't matter.
What I've been impressed with is, especially since you went multi-site, we'll talk about how you decided to do that. Really, your name's not. I know your church loves you and you're the pastor, but I don't feel like in any way it's Rurel Ausley.
Church.
Yeah, I don't. A lot of times, and it's not. I'm not dogging on these guys, but the pastor is just as much a celebrity as the name of the church, and I don't feel like that with Crosspoint at all. So, when did you guys? Obviously, when you got there, I'm imagining things changed a lot over the years.
It
to
has
be
changed
where
a
you
lot,
are today, kind of talk to me about how that happened to help you engage, the changing world. It's changed a lot in 24 years.
Yeah, well, the church was growing. It's had a good foundation because, and probably like your church too, but it's different in the Methodist church because you can have a liberal guy, conservative guy, liberal guy, and, everything can just get all messed up. You're changing different directions every time somebody comes in. But Doug Newton was here 74 to 83, and then Ed Chandler came from 83 to 98, and then I came in 98.
Those are long tenures for Methodist pastors,
one was
right?
7, one was 15, now I'm 24. The larger the church, the larger their tenure is anyway. And since the 80s, when church growth recognized that it was the people that were moving and not the pastor, if the pastor stayed still, his congregation would be changing. Yeah. So the Methodist church changed with that too. Now, when you're in the little country churches, you're wanting to get out just as quick as you can. But once you get up, to the level of what was Niceville first, then you want to stay. So I figured when I came there, I was like 42. I figured I'd be there the rest of my ministry if everything worked out well and that kind of thing. So as we begin to grow or continue to grow finally we just maxed out with our facilities. And from buying property around here, I remember one time I can't remember who it was from the Niceville called me and said, man, y'all killing us, taking all these houses off the church, off the tax roll.
Yeah.
I said, don't give me that, man. We ain't killing y'all. So we're doubling the value of every other house that we can't buy stays here. We were overpaying.
Yeah.
Overpaying on everything. So it took a while, but after a while, there's only so much land. Only so much growth, and you look at, okay, if we build a new sanctuary, where would we build it? And you're talking about $20-25 million to do that. So we sat around and said, okay, so are we done?
Right.
Great Commission no longer applies to us. Let's just have fun the rest of the time. Or does God have something else for us? And that's when thought was just beginning about multi-site, because not many churches were doing it.
Right.
And
especially not in small towns. Yeah. That's
and
one
we
thing
didn't
people,
know anything about it either.
Yeah.
We just were ignorant about it. I think our strongest thing has always been waiting till God directs us and leads us, because we tried to go to Freeport twice, and some of those meetings that we had, hurricanes canceled. So we decided just leave Freeport alone. But anyway, the first church that we just partnered with was in South Crestview. Their pastor went on disability leave, and we just offered to help pastor their church. And then they decided they just wanted to be us.
Okay.
Because if you don't, the bishop still had authority and power over them and could change them. And we were getting ready to invest money in it. We're not going to invest money in it unless it's ours. So
right.
They dissolved.
Okay.
And became Crosspoint.
Yeah.
Except at that point, they kept their name.
Okay. And you guys were still First United Methodist at that point, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We were Niceville UMC.
Oh, Niceville UMC.
We had changed.
Okay. Okay.
From the old English
Got it.
First United Methodist Church of Niceville.
Yeah.
Trying to be more welcoming. So we got them, and then they grew really well. I mean, as soon as we sent a couple of our staff up there. In fact, my wife was one of them, and Bryce Early was one of them, and it grew. It was growing a lot from people from North Crestview coming down. So that's when we had the idea, well, we could plant another one up there in North Crestview. And so we sent 200 out of that group up there, and that's worked really well. So
what? Tell me kind of what, when you got here, you grew, but what kind of brought about the growth that got you to that point where you were maxed out? Were there some things that I know some of the pastors who are listening kind of want to, okay, how'd you even get there?
Okay, I'd be Presbyterian there, sovereignty of God. I know that some of it's just going to sound simplistic and I don't want to say that others aren't doing that either. But we do try to preach the word. We try to honor the word. We try to, and I think our church, we don't have groups that fight against one another. And I don't even know if other churches do not, but I've been in Methodist churches that did. And so
that never happens in Baptist churches ever.
Never. I think that's just, when people think of church, they think more of division than they do unity.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, I think I was fortunate to inherit a group of people that were unified, and we've worked very hard to keep that. And so when other people come, they would like the people there because we're just not fussing and fighting, and that was helpful. So then we began as they began to grow a little bit, we had a guy come in and helped us evaluate everything, how to do some long range planning, and that was when we went with the Community Life Center. And also some hall space that connected all the church. So when we did the Community Life Center, we probably grew by average of 500
Oh, wow.
people.
Yeah. It's a great facility.
One, because it brought people, one of the top needs that we learned in Niceville was family recreation. And there was just no place for that.
Yeah.
And like in Ruckel, they had a basketball tryout. What are you going to pick? 10?
Yeah, right.
Five's going to play and five's going to sit, like that. 100 boys tried out for that team.
Yeah.
And so the need was everywhere. So we started doing that, and that helps, as you know. Anyway, you can get people coming through your building, is helpful. And we'd already had a little bit of that, just let people use the facility as long as there was no real reason why they shouldn't.
Yeah, and I coach in their youth basketball league is the only league in the city, and it's more than just a church league, and I coach in there and have a pretty good record as a coach for that league. Jeremy, the year he coached in the same league as me, Jeremy's the campus pastor there. Our teams didn't play against each other, so I feel like he had something to do with that scheduling.
But when we first started that, people loved it because they were going down to Fort Walton Beach. And a lot of the Christian families just complained about the kind of coach their kids had.
Right. Yeah.
And so you're getting Christian coaches. And we've never held on to anything or also never have, this is all about our church. Got to go to our church to do this. Nothing. In fact, you could use that facility for free. Anybody could. I remember we had a Catholic lady one time. She can I use? Yeah, you can use it. Well, I'm Catholic. Well, we gave it to everybody, and you don't have to be a member of our church to coach, participate, do anything, And if people come to your church out of it, I think we're just glad that all people would go to church. And I think if there would be one thing, what is good for the kingdom is good for the church.
Yeah, that's good.
What's good for the church is not always good for the kingdom.
That's good. Yeah.
So you got to go with what's good for the kingdom, and that's
And that's really the heart behind why we even want to do this.
For those of you listening, I had open hands.
That's good. Yeah,
because they couldn't see that.
No, that's right. Yeah, we want to have, one thing we say every Sunday at our church is, we don't just want to grow our church, we want to build the kingdom, and we want to partner. There might be theological issues that we would disagree on that we just don't feel like deserve the time to discuss, but we can still partner together for the kingdom. And certainly one thing I've realized is how much I can learn from people, not just in my tribe, quote unquote. So I would like to hear from you and your years of experience, just a few things that you feel like you've learned. If there were like a couple leadership, ministry insights you have to share, if you could just share those.
Well, I think a couple of things I would think about. One, in terms of leadership, is I've developed a collaborative style of leadership. I don't go up to the mountain like Moses and come back down with the rules.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do and all of that. We'd bring in a guy maybe, and we sit around and we listen. And of course, I've got my opinions and my thoughts, but I learned also not to speak first, because
did my staff tell you to say that?
No.
Just kidding.
Nothing's going to happen unless I'm on board anyway. It doesn't matter when I speak. I don't have to speak first. I can speak last. I can speak next week.
Yeah.
Unless I'm on board, it's not going to go anywhere anyway. But, I've tried to model not having an agenda. Our agenda is to determine what it is that God wants us to do. That's the agenda. And if I got you secretly trying to back channel stuff and, somebody else over there something else, very, very difficult. So I don't want that. And I don't want to be the guy who's making all the decisions. One, because we need all the voices at the table we can get and those kinds of things. Sometimes they're big enough decisions. They look, okay, you're going to have to make the call. So, but that's rare. And I want that to be rare. So now, I guarantee you, if I'm out 2 weeks, but they don't know if I'm on vacation. They don't know if I'm there. Truth of the matter is they don't know what I'm doing. One is because it all runs with everybody doing that. And so when I say that's the collaborative kind of approach that also honors everybody that's working. When Jim, I can't think of his last name right now, from Generis, we've done 4 or 5 capital stewardship campaigns, and he said, nobody washes a rental car. And basically what he's saying, if you don't have buy-in, you're not a part of it. So I'll tell the staff, I said, you can make any decision you can pay for. If it's a $5 decision, make it. But if it's a $5 million decision, you better have everybody in the church.
That's good. Yeah.
So there's level of decisions. So anyway, we make the decisions together, except on the occasional one that you have to just say, okay, I think we ought to do this. As best I'm reading the Spirit and reading, what we're doing. And then the other thing is doing things with a process. And I'm not a big Alabama fan, although I love it. But, Jeremy would start, that's Coach Saban. I say, well, I was doing process, probably same time Coach Saban was doing it. But here's what I'd say about process. You respect people's feelings and you respect people that they need time to adjust to things. For instance, as we had gotten full in some ways, we had 2 simulcast services in the building. And once we planted our Blue Water Bay campus and a couple hundred people went, we no longer needed those 2 simulcast services. And so, they'll come and report to me sometimes what they're planning on doing. And so they decided in 3 weeks they were going to cancel those services. And I said, oh, really? He said, how long have y'all been talking about this? Oh, man, we've been talking about this for 6 months. Okay, so y'all been talking about it for 6 months, and you're fixing to go tell 120 people in 3 weeks it's gone? Oh, I didn't think about that. Well, I said, you need to think about it. They need some time to process. That's just respecting people.
Right, that's good.
Could we make the decision and do that? Yes, you could. But if you'll do enough of those decisions, you'll pay for it. It'll catch up with you. So they slowed down. They actually went and told them what they were thinking about, got feedback from them, tried to deal with the objections, tried to explain everything. And they probably took a couple of months to do that. And so they just totally minimized the damage that could have been done. But what did they communicate to the people? We care about you.
That's right. They're valuable.
About you're valuable. We're not just up here making decisions over there in room 302 and bringing them down, telling y'all what you're going to do because we can.
That's good. Well, what has been probably the biggest challenge for you in ministry? Biggest difficulty?
All of life of ministry?
Yeah. What thing has been the hardest thing about being a pastor?
What I alluded to earlier was the instantaneous 1 week I was in a 300 attendance church, and the next week I was in 1,000 attendant church, boatload of staff, and couldn't even find my way around all the different buildings.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I really didn't know if I was going to make it or not. And it was a real struggle. It's one of those things where deep down in, I knew I could not turn this down. Deep down in, I knew that this is what God had made me for. Deep down in, I knew that this was what all those previous 18 years, I'd gone through all the churches. I knew every lesson that I'd learned. It was all for this moment. So I really had no choice. I only acted like I needed time to think about it for my own self. Right. But that was a big, big adjustment for me. And I'll just tell you, I went to a counselor to help me through that. It got so difficult because I just wasn't coming out of it like I hoped that I would. And, it would be so embarrassing for a pastor to go and sit in a counselor's room with half my congregation sitting in there too. Yeah, what are you in here for? And this guy came to my office sometimes 4 mornings a week.
That's awesome.
To help me make it.
Well, especially, now that's a lot more popular, a lot more accepted, but 20-something years ago, your pastor doing that.
Well, you still probably wouldn't want to do that if you came in like, you need that act like you're in control and you're not overwhelmed and all of that. But every insecurity that I had, that brought it out.
Wow.
Because up until the first 18 years in the smaller churches, I was gifted enough to do it in the flesh.
That's good. That's good insight.
I had enough gifts, abilities, and my answer was just work a little harder.
Yeah, right.
If there was some problem or some issue, something, you just worked a little harder. And but those coping skills and those leadership skills did not work at this next level. And I had to learn to bring God into the equation. That we needed to operate out of the Spirit. Maybe that's why the church grew.
Well, speaking of security, something I'm very intrigued by is, and this isn't a surprise to those who are members of your church, but it might be a surprise to some in the community. You have announced that you will be retiring next year, right? And transitioning Jeremy Smith into the lead pastor of Crosspoint. Tell me about how you knew it was time to hang your cleats up.
Well, I'll get you back to the technical language that we're using. I don't use the word retire because I'm transitioning into a part-time position. So I will stay there and keep doing stuff.
Okay.
Like some of our Africa ministries. There's a number of things that there's no need for him to have to take on or whatever. Plus, I'll be his servant. Anything that might be particular he wants me to do.
You hear that, Jeremy, if you're listening?
I told him. He knows everything. So I'll be transitioning to part-time, and I tell everybody part-time just refers to pay. that I work as long as I want to, or as little as I want to. But the difference is, I tell them I don't want to make any decisions. I don't want to attend any of the staff meetings. In fact, I don't want to go to anybody's meeting.
That actually sounds great.
Yeah, no, it does sound great.
I guess I got to earn that. I got a little while before I could do that.
That maybe so that. But I think the thing that really did it was, Jeremy Smith has been there for 11 years. He's now been the campus pastor there, and it's about time for him to move into that. And I'll just say a couple of things. You're young and he's young, and with COVID, with church being reinvented, and everything's going to have to be reinvented, it's time for somebody that's got the energy for that. I no longer have the energy to reinvent church, and I have no interest in it either. It's like I've fought the good fight, but I got energy to do ministry and a lot of things I want to do. But dealing with personnel issues wears you down. Just dealing with it all. It's like having children. It's great to have another kid, but it didn't lessen the load. It's not like the farm days where, great, we got another kid now to put out there on the back 40. And adding staff, they take care of one issue, but they bring issues with them.
Right.
And so anyway, I felt like that this was a really good time because I think Jeremy was ready. We need his energy. He's prepared. So I think just a whole number of things came into play about the timing of it. Now, in the United Methodist Church, you have to retire at 72.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay.
So, and now I go back to the word retirement for a second. On paper and with the United Methodist Church, I enter into retired status.
Got it. Okay.
Like our pastoral care pastor, Hurstel Carter, entered into retired status with the United Methodist Church, but not a single thing changed about his position. I am the only ordained elder that has to change positions at 72. I could no longer be the lead pastor there. Okay. Every other clergy person can keep their job.
Right.
but I could not.
Okay.
So when I actually transition in July 1, I will be 68.
Okay.
So could I go 4 more years? Yes, but why? I mean, right now.
I wish some of our politicians would listen to that advice too.
I mean, right now we just need his energy, and we need, fresh eyes and somebody that still got the push.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like as many decisions, you were really saying, hey, what is best for the people around me and best for the church and not.
I could have drawn a check for 4 more years.
Yeah.
I don't think that'd been good for anybody.
Right.
But on another thing, they have all been very appreciative. See, I took the lead on all this.
Yeah.
I asked them to develop a transition committee and all kinds of things. And they interviewed everybody before we made any decisions. And, it just took all the pressure off.
Yeah,
I mean, how do you go to the lead pastor and say,
it's time to put you out on the iceberg, right? Yeah.
We think maybe it's time. So they were very appreciative. Plus, it put us determining what we're doing. Plus, back to the United Methodist system, this all had to be okayed by the bishop.
Yeah. So
I have the relationship with the bishop. And, one day I called him up and I said, I want to share with you what our church has been doing, that we have to, we've been working on transition and everything, and I have told them every step of the way that you have to approve every single thing. So nobody's under any illusion that we're operating on our own and all that, but just wanted to tell you, shared everything with him. He was fine with it. He said, y'all have done everything just right. And he said, I have no problem appointing Jeremy Smith as the lead pastor there when it comes time.
That's awesome.
So, man, we just had it all taken care of a year ago, and it's and Jeremy and I got us a coach. We got this lady out of Atlanta who's a what I call it, onboarding person in the corporate world. Okay, and she's now working in the church world, and so we hired her, and she's working with him and me together. And then they brought my wife into the conversation because she's going to be an employee. She'll be the wife of the former lead pastor, but Jeremy will be over her. And then we bring in Greg in as executive pastor in the discussion. So we're doing every single thing we can to make this as smooth, and it's going to be.
Well, we're excited. We're praying for you, and we're excited for Jeremy too. As a friend of Jeremy, I just think I'm excited to see how God uses him. Well, hey, again, I just want to say to you how grateful I am for you, and your welcoming me and warmness to me coming to Niceville, and even though you make too many Baptist jokes, but we'll let that go. And
any Baptist joke is generally making the Methodist feel bad.
Anyway, but really appreciate you, and appreciate you giving your time, and just anybody who has, especially, even I'm not even 40, and I have seen so many guys fall and burn out and, give up in ministry and have moral failures, and just somebody who's made it as long as you have, specifically, staying in the same place for so long. Just admire that. And appreciate that. And thank you for your church's partnership with us and our community and all you've done. And thank you very much.
Well, you're very kind, James, and I appreciate that. And I've always tried to be friends with everybody, and I feel stronger about kingdom than I do denomination.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Anyway, I'll always been that way.
Yeah. Well, next week, we will continue in our series on Pastor Appreciation, as we have my good friend, Chris Shinnick, church planner and now pastor. At some point, you can't be called a church planner anymore, of Manna Church here in Niceville. So we will see you, or you will see us, or you will hear us next week.
Thanks for listening to Boggy Talk. We are so glad you joined in the conversation. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss a beat.